Okay, it should be recording, right? Do you guys see the little recording dot?
Yeah, it says recording.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. And then so now I'm gonna pass on the mic to Casey Myers. So she is the founder and director of One Digital World, and she's doing some really amazing work building computer labs in refugee camps and shelters, and just bring computer and internet literacy into these communities. So thank you so
Great.
much for coming.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hope you guys are doing well tonight. Thanks for being here. Nice to see your faces. Let's see here. Let me see if I can share my screen with you, and I'll go ahead and put up a few slides. Bear with me here. All right. Do you see my slide with my notes or just my slide?
We see the notes.
Okay, hang on.
Maybe press use slideshow on the left side.
How about now?
Perfect. We only see the screen.
All right, perfect. So I am the founder and executive director of One Digital World. We are a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered here in San Diego. And that all began, so let me kind of introduce myself first. My background is in education. So I have worked in education for over a dozen years. And in 2016, I decided to take a leap of faith. I loved working in education and I really believed in that, but I wanted something more hands-on. And so I decided to quit my job, rent out my house, sell everything that I couldn't fit into a backpack, and travel around the world for a year. So I spent 2016 traveling through South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And during that time, I started hearing about the beginnings of the refugee crisis in Europe. So when I finished that trip, I didn't have any commitments anywhere yet. So I literally got on my computer and Googled, where is the refugee crisis? And I found that the heart of it was a little tiny island in the middle of the Mediterranean called Lesbos. I thought, well, I can do anything for 30 days. I have managed a staff of 90 for a multi-million-dollar company, and I also know how to pick up garbage and clean toilets. And I don't know what you do in a refugee camp, but if it's anywhere in the middle, I'm a pretty quick learner, so I'll give it a shot. So thinking I'd be there for 30 days, that quickly turned into a year. And I absolutely was the most transformative year of my life. I met truly amazing people. I started teaching educational programs for children, some English programs with some of the young adults there. And you can see in the picture here, using a hotspot on my phone and some borrowed laptops and yoga mats, where we sat underneath an olive tree in the middle of camp, and I started teaching them how to use computers so they could write resumes. When my visa ended at the end of 2017, I came back to the US and knew this was absolutely what I wanted to do. I wanted to do humanitarian work. I was really interested in the global perspective. And in order to do that, I started looking at course online again, and pretty much everywhere requires a master's. So I found the Master's in Social Innovation program at University of San Diego, and they had an accelerated one-year program. And it sounded pretty similar to some of the things that I had been doing in the camps previously. So I spent that year back in San Diego, earning my master's, and heard about an opportunity for the Global Social Innovation Challenge. During that time, I used the challenge to be able to create a curriculum, particularly for refugees, to prepare them for life after the camps, and pitched it at the event and won runner-up for University of San Diego, which got me to the global level, and also audience choice. So I ended up winning $4,500 in seed funding. So I took that money and went right back to Greece. I went to a different island this time, a new refugee camp, and I implemented a pilot. So I spent 4 months in 2019, that summer, teaching refugee women digital literacy, basically how to use computers and the internet, and preparing them for life after the camps. And it was amazing. In 4 months, I had over 200 women graduate from the program. It was immensely popular. And next, actually, before I switch here, so with that information, I decided I came back to the US, and in March of this year, I founded One Digital World. So the problem now, there's 79.5 million forcibly displaced people around the world at the end of 2019. That is more than in recorded history. This year, we actually surpassed the amount of refugees we had after World War II. And it was announced earlier this week that the United States plans to increase our refugee resettlement cap from 15,000 to 125,000 this coming year. That is an 833% increase. Now, because refugees and displaced persons by nature, you're coming from areas of violence, poverty, and oppression. So 3/4 of adolescents actually haven't even finished high school. And research shows us that on average, it takes 7 years for refugees to become self-sufficient and begin contributing to the United States economy. What that means is it causes lots of problems, strains on our economy, which can lead to hate crimes, people being forced to work under the table because they don't have visas, and exploitation of workers. So asylum seekers face many challenges. Imagine you're an asylum seeker and you've been forced to flee your country because of persecution, war, violence, and your life was so dangerous and unmanageable there. You've gone to a country where you do not speak the local language. You have been traveling mostly on foot over 2,500 miles. The local economy where you came from has a very different labor market than the country that you're going to. We don't have nearly as many coffee plantations and mining as they do in Central America. And you're alone. You left behind your friends and your family and everything that you knew before to a completely different culture. Our mission is to empower asylum seekers to be self-reliant by providing them access to resources that prepare them for integration. And the way that we do that is we partner with refugee camps and shelters to bring virtual resources to migrants and asylum seekers through computer and internet access and skills training. And we look at a three-pronged solution to be holistic. In education, we provide computer and internet access in our computer labs. And then we teach ESL, because most of the internet is still in English, regardless of which country you go to. We teach digital literacy, because most of the refugees and asylum seekers that I work with only knows how to use Facebook and maybe YouTube to watch music videos. But over 90% of jobs today require some kind of computer competency. And that data is from before COVID. So I'm sure it's increased. Now, we also partner with other organizations to provide more in-depth services. Is anybody familiar with Coursera?
Yes.
Okay, I see some nodding hands, some hands,
Yeah.
some faces. So Coursera provides open online access to the world's best universities. Columbia University, we've got international universities as well. You can get classes from Harvard. They provide online classes, and they have an amazing program for refugees where they provide scholarships. We've actually partnered with them so that we're able to facilitate their classes in our computer labs. So you can still be attending a university if you are at a higher education level. We also provide general education, math, science, reasoning through language arts through our virtual instruction. Our digital literacy class allows participants to be able to earn certificates from Microsoft. And the course is actually continuing education credit from the University of San Diego. Now, we have mentored with some of the top chief technology officers around the world. We have mentors from the organization's 7 CTOs. So leaders in technology will be working with our students as they're going through this process and building lifelong relationships. We also provide legal support. So we are not lawyers, but when you're in a refugee camp or shelter, it is very, very difficult to be able to access a lawyer. And it's even more difficult to be able to afford a lawyer. Pro bono lawyers are very, very, very few. They're already tapped for resources. So we're working with Formally, which is a program which provides form filing. So you can go online and complete your asylum application. You can fill out all of your documentation on there and then work with one of our partnership lawyers, the National Lawyers Guild, and you are more likely to be picked up by a lawyer. If you have legal representation when you go to court, you are 5 times more likely to be granted asylum. We also work with them to be able to assist refugees and asylum seekers with getting their work authorization quickly. So they can complete these forms online and it's very user-friendly. And that brings us to our last step, which is health. So California has really amazing programs here for health services that we don't offer all over the United States. But we are working primarily in Tijuana at the moment. And I'll talk more about that in just, I think, the next 2 slides. But we are actually working with the California Department of Public Health because when an asylum seeker or a refugee is relocated to California, the very first day, they're actually eligible for Medi-Cal. And they are eligible for insurance through family health centers. So we work with family health centers and the California Department of Public Health to be able to get their information so that first they know that. They're able to get telemedicine and information about public health even when they're in the camps to prepare. And then they know where and how to get medical resources as soon as they are able to get asylum. So was an announcement in December of 2019 that Columbia University in New York did a big study, and they realized that asylum seekers have a much better chance of integrating and becoming self-reliant if they have a college degree. Shocking. But they realized that one of the barriers is cost. So they are one of the first Ivy League university, which is providing scholarships to top students who are refugees so that they can attend their programs. This is absolutely amazing, and we completely support it. Other Ivy Leagues are now starting to look into this option as well. However, as I mentioned before, 3/4 of the asylum seekers we work with haven't finished their high school diploma. So they might not be ready to go to Columbia University yet. We would love to be able to get them there, but we want to bridge that gap. We identify that there are so many people that aren't ready for that step, so we want to get them ready. Right now, since people are in lockdown due to COVID, they also need increased computer and remote technology knowledge, because we're probably going to be working from home long after the pandemic is over. There are currently over 9,000 migrants living in Tijuana, Mexico, and 90% of them are from Central America and have traveled up. We have developed partnerships with 2 migrant shelters in the Tijuana area and work with a team of 12 volunteers to keep our costs low. Currently, to start our shelters, we have raised $2,478. Most of our donations are in kind to provide supplies for our computer labs. We are hoping to open our first labs in January of 2021. So this is our timeline that we're looking at right now. Espacio Migrante is one of the shelters that we're working with in Tijuana. We are also working with a nonprofit in Los Angeles, Human Rights First, that is working with asylum seekers who are being released from detention centers due to COVID, but are still waiting for their asylum trial. So although our goal is to start locally in Tijuana, there are refugees all around the world. So we'll be opening up locations. I would love to be able to work myself out of a job and there be no more refugees, but as long as there are, we want to be able to serve them. Now, as I mentioned previously, we are a 501c3 tax-deductible nonprofit. So to be sustainable, we work off of grant funding and competitions. We're currently working on a competition with MIT. We also receive corporate and individual giving. So this is mostly our donations. We receive individual donations, and we're working with larger companies for corporate social responsibility, or CSR. Through our website, we do sell merchandise. You might see my bag back here, which says "No human is illegal." So we have tote bags. We also have t-shirts, says "We'll trade racists for refugees." So we sell merchandise to be able to help sustain our operations as well. And we do fundraising events. We're currently hosting a virtual hackathon. So we have different teams that are competing and raising awareness through social media and peer-to-peer fundraising. And I could do lots of public speaking events like this. So I'm really excited that you guys are interested and that you guys are looking and working in the field. Previously, I have also spoken at young nonprofit professionals, a few churches, and the list goes on. So these are different ways that we're always trying to figure out how can we bring money in, because we want to provide services for free. Now, I mentioned we do have a team of about 12 volunteers, but this is our leadership team. So Renee Mendez is our technology officer. He's actually going to be attending very shortly the Wasson Social Innovation program in Boulder, Colorado. But he helps by refurbishing our computers and setting up our computer labs on site. And Magdalena Bushwell is German, is working with us. We have a very international team. We have team members in Denmark, Germany, London, Boston, Hawaii, and many in San Diego and Mexico, of course. And so Magdalena is focused on our marketing and comms. So I told you a lot about us, but I wanted to give you a moment just to listen from one of our graduates. This is Cheryl.
I met my teacher Casey in the camp, and then I started to take computer lessons with her before. And I actually think all refugee women deserve the right to have access to computers, because now in the world where we're living, everyone is supposed to have access. Everything we do, we need computers.
So our idea is that when we work together, whether it's volunteers, whether it's supporters, whether it's refugees, asylum seekers, activists, or advocates, when we all work together, no matter whether there's a pandemic or not, we can use technology to create one digital world. Thanks. So I want to hear from you guys. Any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, you guys can feel free to chime in.
Oh, I had a question regarding how your business model is set up. I was wondering about how you apply for grants and competitions and what the process behind that is about, because I'm interested in that sort of not marketing technique, but acquiring money for your services.
Yeah, great question. It is a process, I will tell you. And as an executive director, that's so much of what I do, much more than I anticipated. But there are different directories that are available online. So for example, one that we use a lot is called Instrumental. It's Instrumental, but it's just without the letter A at the end, just instrument and then a capital L. And you can go on there and you can search for all different kinds of grants. You put in the parameters of, where your organization will be, and who your demographic is that you're going to be serving. And they'll have a list of a lot of things that are available. You do have to do background research. I would say the first things are figuring out who funds similar projects to what you do, and then checking their 990s. So their 990 is their tax form, and it is public information if you're a nonprofit or a foundation. You can find it through Charity Navigator or GuideStar, and you can find their tax information and then see who they have been funding and how much. So something we started by doing was looking at our program, for example, is pretty innovative. There's not really anybody else doing what we're doing in our area. So that was a struggle for us, I think, much more than most organizations have to deal with. But I started looking into focusing on STEM, focusing on women, focusing on refugees. And then if you are like One Digital World, a startup, really focusing on who provides startup funds, because that's also very different than organizations that have been around for a while. And then to prepare for writing grants, read books. I have a great one, which is on the other side of the room. Yeah, I'll grab it in a second and I can show you that I highly recommend, but there's lots of different tutorials and lots of how-to books on writing a first letter of intent. And then from that point, they'll let you know whether they are interested for a full proposal. And it takes a few people, and it might take a month or two of working on and drafting, but it's worth the process. It's a learning process. And there's a few places also, there's nonprofit professionals online, and they also provide free access to looking at different foundations too. There's lots of different places that you can find the listings, but a lot of them cost money, like have like monthly subscriptions, but they provide a free one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question as well. So I'm interested in potentially like doing like humanitarian work abroad, and I'm also like super interested in refugee camps, but like a concern that's always been like brought up to me by my family is just like safety. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anywhere in particular that you were interested in looking into?
Either like Southeast Asia or yeah.
Cool. I actually was in Cambodia when I really first started learning about refugees and got very, very interested. So I have not worked with refugees in that area, but I absolutely would love to. I think it would be fascinating. I've worked in a few different refugee camps and now migrant shelters as well, because Mexico doesn't call them refugee camps, they call them migrant shelters, but it's the same thing. And something that gives me frame of reference. So I have traveled to, I think, like 53 countries at this point. So the only place that I have ever been pickpocketed, that I have ever been robbed in my life, was New Orleans. So the only country I've ever been robbed in is the United States. I've also been to all 50 states. So it's frame of reference. I mean, there are especially this year we've seen, but there's dangerous places in the United States. There's dangerous places in San Diego. And I would never lie, and I don't recommend to you in trying to calm your family down by telling them there's absolutely no danger, but there's danger everywhere. And it's really up to you of making well-educated decisions and trusting your gut. When I work in camps, honestly, I've never felt in any danger working in any of my camps. I never have. And I would say, there's smart things to do when you're working in a camp. Most camps also don't ever let volunteers go anywhere by themselves. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is for your personal safety. Two is for the safety of the refugees or asylum seekers that you're with, because rumors always can happen. There's a lot of pretense and a lot of safety when you're working with at-risk populations. So you probably, I spent the least amount of time by myself when I was in camps, because you're always working with other people. That's kind of the purpose of your work and being there. So you're going to be with other volunteers, you're going to be with other people on your team, and you're also probably not going to be in the camp after dark unless there is like one big special event for everyone. I didn't know what to expect the first time that I went to my first refugee camp. I thought, maybe it'll be really depressing, maybe it'll be really sad or scary. And it was the happiest, most welcoming place I have ever been to date. Again, 53 countries and 50 states. The most welcoming and happiest place. I mean, everyone was just, and not to say every refugee camp is like that, and it definitely had its, problems. You don't want to live in a camp, but the people were just beautiful, and they have been through so much, and all they want was just a better future. So it's going to be, you're surrounded just by nature of who becomes a refugee versus the people that don't ever make it out of their countries. In order to be a refugee, you have to be brave. You have to believe in yourself. You have to really, really want a good future because you're risking everything. So they are truly inspiring people. And most of the time, they're families. It's lots of little kids and young parents. So it's really beautiful to be able to be a part of their life as they're on this just amazing journey that most people stateside will never really understand. And when you go there, you're really able to see what a beautiful experience. And that is true love for your family, to be able to risk everything to be able to provide an amazing future for your children. So always be safe, but I think camps, your organization will get shut down if anything ever happens to you. So they have a very big interest in keeping you safe.
I had another question along the same lines of what Maya was asking, but I was kind of wondering more about, was there a particular organization that you were volunteering with when you were abroad, or were you, like, I was just kind of curious about what that process looked like when you were traveling abroad. Like, what were the logistics like and stuff? Because I'm definitely still interested in that too, but I wasn't quite sure what that process looked like.
Nice. So it's a little different every time, of course, like everything is. The first time that I went abroad, I literally I'd never known anyone that had done anything like that. So I just honestly hopped on Google and tried to figure out, I hear there's a refugee crisis, where are they? And found that they were on this little island called Lesbos in Greece. So then I started Googling organizations working with refugees in Lesbos, and I found a Dutch organization called Movement on the Ground. And I sent them an email and asked if I could come and volunteer with them. And someone responded to me and said, yes, absolutely. And you can go ahead and wire your donation to this bank account. And I thought, well, that seems really, really suspicious. I'm going to go ahead and not do that. But I also was like, I don't know, their website seems legitimate. Like, am I just being overly cautious? Like, I'm not just wiring money off somewhere. And so I was like, I think before I do that, I really prefer to have a Skype call with you. And so they obliged, and I had a Skype call. And in the Skype call, instead of them interviewing me to come and volunteer, I basically interviewed them because I was trying to figure out if they were legitimate, because I had no really other way to check a Dutch organization out in Greece. And I had a wonderful, wonderful chat with their volunteer coordinator, and we talked for a while. And I said, okay, I would like to volunteer with you, but I'm still not wiring you money. I can bring money with me, because a lot of nonprofits that you'll see on the ground do ask for donation from volunteers, and it's a way that they sustain their programs. So they'll say, we ask for volunteers to donate, this much per week that they plan on volunteering to cover costs. So that is a common thing. I don't know how common that is in the US. I'd never heard of it anywhere else, but I've now worked in a number of camps in Europe, and they all did it. And so I did go out there, and I was very happy that I did end up meeting somebody at the airport, and they helped me to provided housing. And then I pretty quickly, I think within 2 weeks, they asked me to be one of their coordinators. And so as a coordinator for them, they provided me with an apartment, a car rental. They don't do that all the time, so maybe, but I wouldn't, definitely they should help you with finding housing, and then figuring out your transportation. And then they also gave me like a stipend for food, and I had a mortgage back home, so they gave me a little bit more of a stipend because I negotiated with them. And then when I went out for my pilot, so after I got seed funding from University of San Diego, and I went back out. I actually had been contacted by someone that I had become friends with that worked for a different nonprofit while I'd been out there the first time. And she reached out to me and had said, the programs that you had started out there were so amazing. I'm actually starting a shelter for women refugees, and we would love to have you come out and do something like that for us. And so I ended up using that as my thesis for grad school and for the competition. And so it was really great. I was able to align all those things and use that to develop my curriculum. And I already knew exactly where I was going to be implementing it. So when I went out for them, because it was another organization, they also provided me with housing and a stipend for food, and they bought my plane ticket. But I also know, I think that both times I was kind of one of the only people that did it. So it just varies a little bit, and don't be afraid to ask, because it is about a lot about negotiations. Sometimes they have funding and sometimes they don't. And I know something that really helped me a lot to be able to have the flexibility is when I went out the first time, I literally was helping to make soup. I was picking up garbage. There's lots of that. I helped with kind of babysitting. And then it was in my free time that I actually put together, I kind of did like a needs analysis after I'd been there for a couple of weeks. And I met with the founder of the nonprofit I was working with. It was the first time that I'd met him. I'd heard of him, but I'd been there for a few weeks. I'd never even met him before. And so I got a meeting with him, and I had my notebook, and I was like, hey, so I've noticed a couple of things here, and I just had some ideas, and maybe they're all terrible. Maybe there's perfectly logical reasons of that you've already thought of these things and there's reasons why you're not doing them, or maybe you haven't. I don't know, but I just wanted to maybe talk to you and just, throw some ideas out at you. One was like creating a gym. I don't know. I think I had like 3 or 4 different ideas. And the last one I got to was to create and build a computer lab. And he just looks at me and he goes, yeah, do it. And I thought I was just giving him ideas for like, hey, these are suggestions of what other projects you guys could do. So again, Google's your best friend. I literally went home that night and just Googled how to start a computer lab and started one there, then started one on a different island. And now it's only been 2.5 years later and I have One Digital World. So it's been a wild ride, but just being open and paying attention, listening, checking what the needs are, and then being really open and flexible.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like, and I think this is kind of what I've heard from other people who are in the nonprofit world. It's like a lot of like taking initiative and just kind of like putting yourself out there.
100%. A lot of times, especially with nonprofits, is there's a million things that they want to do, but cost and manpower are hard because again, you're trying to provide services that can't pay for it, but they still cost money. So yeah, if you can take initiative and then be flexible and, be listening to them, know that even when you come in, you're like, I don't have all the answers, but I have some ideas. What can I do or how can I help? They'll love it. And, when I was in that position, that's exactly how I ended up getting more responsibility and then also more assistance. And I got a lot more perks than other volunteers. But now as a leader of my own organization, I love it when my volunteers come with that. They have different ideas. It's amazing. It's hard being in the leadership role and having so many ideas and you don't have time to do hardly any of them. So taking initiative is amazing. And just, yeah, lots of conversations and showing up, being consistent, particularly if you are interested in working with refugees and asylum seekers. So much more even than anyone in the US is just be consistent. They're used to people not following up. They're used to people not showing up. Volunteers tend to promise the world to refugees and with the best of intentions and rarely deliver. So under promise and over deliver and just be consistent and show up.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I also have a question. So I'm also interested in going into like nonprofit work, especially with like refugees. I think one thing that I've always been slightly worried about is this sense of guilt as an American coming into an area where either the situation has either been worsened or caused by American intervention. Um, and so I've always been worried about either the guilt that I would feel or perhaps the environment, which would be entirely like understandable if there was like anti-American sentiment. But like, what's this like usually the experience as far as that goes in your work?
That's a very, very good question, because yeah, it's kind of the elephant in the room. I was actually pretty surprised. I was nervous as well, particularly because when I went, the first camp that I was in, it was 2017. So the United States was deploying a lot in Syria. There were many terrorist attacks that happened in the Middle East while I was there. And so people were regularly having American troops like entering areas where they had friends and family. And I was so nervous. And I think maybe for a second, I had this idea of, oh, am I responsible for that? But if you're responsible for the actions of your government, then so are they. And that's not accurate at all. The whole reason that you're there is because you see the difference between them and Al Qaeda. That's not the same at all. They're a refugee. They're here because they also are against that. You're here because you also are against anything that causes displacement of people. And so in that same kind of judgment, you're separating. People are not their governments. And the more that I've traveled, and particularly working in camps, the more that you realize some people do get a little bit confused, but it happens much less with refugees because they're fleeing often their governments. So they know you're not the same. On the flip side of that, I also got to know much more about politics from those areas because there were a lot of Kurdish in the camp, and Kurdish love the American military because we work with them. We work alongside their forces against the Iraqi and Iranian governments. So they'll love you for being American, and most other people won't really care, in my experience. I noticed much more of that rhetoric from people actually that weren't in camps. None before this current administration. When I was traveling before that, people loved Americans. And then right after the election, it got a bit awkward. But I really didn't get it that much in the camps. And if you do, always you can explain to them as well, be like, yeah, I understand that. And I'm not a part of my government. I don't support everything they do. In fact, I think it's really important that we all work with each other as humans first. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm focused on being out here so that we can work on something together as humans and not as Americans and Cambodians or Syrians or Greeks or Mexicans or whatnot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hope that helps. Hope that answers your question.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in and ask another question. I know I just asked one, but I had a question specifically about how you've been sustaining like fundraising, and because I know you mentioned like financial strain is a huge problem for nonprofits, especially with the pandemic with COVID. Like, how has that posed a challenge to you guys, or if it's posed a challenge at all? In like your business model and sustaining your fundraising and stuff?
Yeah, great question. And I can speak from my experience, but I do want to let you know that it's definitely very, very different for each organization. So I have found the best luck by working with partnerships. So as a new organization, and we are first trying to get our name out there. So I have a lot of it is about building legitimacy. So based on my experience, certainly helps a lot, but by working with partner organizations on different projects, that also gives you reach to who their supporters are. So we do a lot of, for example, I was kind of name dropping a little bit, right? And not that that's particularly important for you guys, but that is really important to our partners. So we really, for example, our most recent announcement was with the organization Formally, who's providing the program for them to fill out legal documentation online, which then increases their chances of getting legal support or representation in court, which then increases their chances of actually getting asylum. And that's been really beneficial because we are working with them. They provide an online program, but they had no way for asylum seekers to be able to access that online program. And they had no way for them to learn how to use the online program. So they had tried a few other things, and it had been really difficult because most asylum seekers just weren't competent enough on their cell phones to be able to do it, and didn't have access to computers anywhere. So it was a really natural partnership for us. And that's great. We want to be able to provide that service to people. But the best thing that came out of it is that the creator is actually a graduate from Stanford in the law department. And so she has connections with the American Bar Association, the National Lawyers Guild, who we're now working with in a partnership pitch to present to their boards. And a benefit is lawyers tend to have quite a lot of capital, right? So it really benefits our program, but also we're trying to think strategically of what partnerships not only benefit our beneficiaries, benefit asylum and seekers that we're serving, but also create more sustainability for us. If other organizations have a vested interest in us being successful, then we can work together towards funding on that. So it's really difficult to try and go it alone, especially in the beginning, but lots and lots of networking and building partnerships, and then being able to support each other in fundraising and even working on grants together. So I mentioned the organization we're working with in Los Angeles. So we just submitted a grant. It's 5 organizations together are applying for one grant. It's called the community grant, and it's 2 years. So you get $50,000 each year for 2 years. But being able to show that we're working in partnership with each other, which also looks great to funders, but it also gives you a better opportunity to communicate with the grant writers who are going to be interested in what you're doing. The more names that you have on it, the more higher likelihood that they know somebody or that they are somehow connected to not only your mission, but your organization. And so that helps a lot as well. So we've definitely restructured our business model a lot, because in the beginning, it was just focused on our beneficiaries, just focused on serving refugees and asylum seekers, which that's still our number one thing. That's what we want to do, but you can't do it without funding. So I really had to sit back and think about who benefits from this and who benefits enough from this that they would be willing to pay for it. And so that's why I have done many different informational interviews. If you're interested in something along that lines too, doing informational interviews. And right now you're a student, it's the best time for it. People that are professionals love meeting with students and doing informational interviews. Let them know it's only going to be like 15 minutes, but it's a great way to get in and get to know what is it exactly that they do and what exactly are their pain points, because what you're trying to provide is a solution, but you can't do it if you don't know exactly what their pain point is. You might be wrong, So doing your due diligence that way, but also it's a really great way for you to be building relationships with these people that either maybe they have funding to be able to support you, or they know who else does and they want to be able to connect you because now they have a vested interest that your solution is making their lives easier and their jobs easier.
That's really interesting. So what you're saying is you basically, so your initial goal obviously was to help asylum seekers, but you, through that partnership with, was it formally, you were saying formally?
Yeah, formally.
You were able to solve an issue that they had in providing their own services. So it's kind of like you're building a network with other people to create more effective solutions in the long term.
Yeah, and we had started just as, I mean, as I mentioned in the beginning, my background is in education. So I started just by developing education programs. You know, I realized as soon as people go to a totally new country, if their work experience, you know, is working in coffee plantations and mining, they're going to have a really hard time finding a job in San Diego. So they need to get skills that match our labor market, which is most of the time the one that kind of trumps everything is computer skills. Like you need to know how to use a computer and you need to know how to use the internet, not just for work, but for everyday life. Like in our programs, we also teach them, how do you find a doctor in your neighborhood? How do you figure out what school district your kid is going to go to if you live in a neighborhood, and how do you get in contact with them to get them registered? And English is so important. Certainly if you come to the United States, but even if you go anywhere else, it's the international language and most of the internet is still in it. So we have a number of these different educational programs that we started with, but by working in the camps and asking around and finding out what other things are going on, what other problems are they facing, we were connected with formally and realized that the thing that they were facing was just being able to get their program in front of the people that they wanted to, in front of asylum seekers and refugees, which is great. It provided a more holistic approach for what we do. So we've definitely changed and adapted a lot. We also didn't plan on doing healthcare, but the California Department of Public Health called me and they said, we've had to shut down every single project that we have except for one. And that is finding asylum seekers so we can let them know they actually have health insurance. And we thought, well, wonderful. We want them to get access to this health insurance. And we have a way you can contact them before they get lost and ICE drops them off somewhere on our side of the border saying, great, you got it. Welcome to America. So it's great to be able to, you know, get their collaboration and be able to have them as a partner to be able to get funding, but also to be able to have, you know, build our legitimacy. So it does change. I think a piece of advice that was given to me that I found extremely useful was when you are developing your program, particularly in the beginning, make sure you know what your mission is so you don't drift, but also know what your opportunities are and go for the ones that will make you money the fastest. So at first I'd been thinking, no, we can't work with them. It's not education. No, we can't work with them. It's not education. But yeah, that actually, we want to serve asylum seekers and those things do. And if that can help us pay for our educational programs, fantastic. We're only providing better service.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We have like 2 minutes before it's 8. But does anyone else have any questions? If not, I kind of had a question. So how do you like foresee your work changing with like a change in administration? Going from like the Trump administration to the Biden administration, do you like foresee like a lot more work coming your way? Or I know like I don't know if like MPP is still gonna like stay in place, like, and if that does, like if like Tijuana, like the refugees in Tijuana are like gonna like decrease, like yeah, so like how do you anticipate it changing?
Yeah, solid question. There's been a lot of promises, but we have to wait and see what shakes out. So we're continuing to kind of prepare for a lot of different options. So I do attend each month, the third Tuesday of every month. There is the San Diego Refugee Forum. If any of you are ever interested in attending, anyone can attend. And it is virtual. I think today was the last one for the year, so it'll start again in January. But it was announced by the county today that the Trump administration actually said that they were reducing. Last year, we had a refugee resettlement cap of 15,000. Trump announced for this coming year, which they start the refugee resettlement, their year goes from September through October. So starting now, is going from 15,000 for the year down to 10,000. Biden has just announced he's actually increasing it to 125,000. So that will be many more people. Biden also has said before the election happened that he would end the MPP, or the Migrant Protection Protocols, commonly referred to as Remain in Mexico. Hasn't come out with a plan or a timeline for that yet. So we really hope that he does do that. And we hope that he does that soon, because that's been a major barrier to people being able to get representation in court. And that may change a lot. That may mean then that people are coming over faster. We're seeing more asylum seekers. Ideally, we would see more asylum seekers in the United States. Also, we are looking into, he had said, again, before the election, that he wanted to close down all for-profit prisons, which would include detention centers, which means he hasn't come up with another plan, but what we had before that was catch and release, which means that, because basically it's a civil law, not a criminal law, to not fill out your asylum paperwork. So right now we imprison people for breaking civilian law by putting them in detention centers. It's the only civilian thing. It's not even a crime that we can put people in prison for. So if we stop doing that and we allow people to go back to, you just show up for court, which if you're a family, you have a 100% chance actually of showing up in court. Every other group has over 90% chance of showing up for court. Most are 98% or more. So we haven't had a problem with people showing up for their asylum trials, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with those. So yeah, we are expecting changes, but I don't know when they will happen, and I don't know exactly how they will happen. So we continue to monitor that. We also actually just recently started putting together our newsletter. So we do put out a weekly newsletter. We try and post updates also to our social media. So please follow us we have Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And you can visit our website, which is onedigitalworld.net. And subscribe to our newsletter. And we're always trying to make sure that people are kept up to date on what's going on with detention centers, what's going on the border, what's going on with asylum seekers. So we just have to do our due diligence and keep updated on how that's working. We would love for people not to be forced in Mexico. It isn't safe because they don't have the infrastructure. In 2018, they started receiving huge caravans of people, and there's asylum seekers that are there that have been waiting for over 2 years now. And it's just, they weren't prepared to get that many people from Central America in such a short time. San Diego wouldn't be able to handle all of a sudden that giant influx. And Tijuana it doesn't have the infrastructure even San Diego does. So we hope it changes, but also depends on what that looks like. So we're just trying to keep up to date, and we'll adapt as can be. And we've got partners on both sides of the border. So I'm pretty sure it can only improve. So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all the time that we had for today. So again, Casey, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming and sharing. I know this has been very, very enlightening for me. I don't know if anyone else has anything you want to say to Casey.
Oh yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and speak to us. And I know for all of us, I feel like it was very informative and even like empowering experience because we're all girls here, and I just feel like we need more girls, I guess, in the forefront of, honestly, like managerial positions like this, doing really great work. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you guys keep doing what you're doing. I went ahead and I put in my email and I put in our website. Again, follow us on social, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always here to support you, not only working with, in the field in humanitarian work, or particularly with refugees or asylum seekers or advocacy, but also you're absolutely right. We have to support women in the field and as much as you can. The part that I did leave out of my spiel is that when I decided to go and take my initial trip around the world, I got to go with two of my best girlfriends. We all actually came over to my house one night and had some wine and played a lot of Uno. And by the end of the night, we decided to quit our jobs and travel the world for a year. So
That's honestly amazing. That's like the goal.
it was phenomenal. So yeah, you can also find me on Facebook and see a lot of my pictures from there too. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing, and keep building each other up. And yeah, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask the hard questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna stop recording now.